Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Augmenttors with me, George Smith, sponsored by Augmentt. Very excited to have Mr. Chris Orris join me today. Chris has been someone who's been in the channel at a variety of companies for quite some time and is the founder of Burnouts. And that's really the topic of our conversation today. We're here to learn a little bit more about what burnout is, how we can identify it, how we can get ahead of it, and also how we can maybe proactively address some of the problems that burnout causes. So, Chris, welcome. How are you today?
I'm great, George. Thank you so much for having me.
And before we get started, Chris, I know this is maybe something you're becoming a little bit known for in the channel. Quite the array of t-shirts behind you there. It seems to be something, when I've been at your booth a couple of times, you always seem to have a lot of great t-shirts. What's the story behind that?
I really appreciate it, George. I'm gonna be honest. I'd flip my camera around and show you, but Burnout's headquarters, if you will, is being built right in my apartment in Newport News, Virginia. And the shirts on my wall are what I had the money to be able to buy to make sure that I had a brand as I attended a trade show. Right, I think every MSP or vendor that watches this right now knows how expensive it is to go to a trade show. But you have to put in the effort. So I love it. I wish I could have more. I've been staring at them for weeks, so I'm kind of like, I need something new up there.
Well, I've seen
So
plenty of people wearing them. I know, MSPs and other attendees are like always like a good t-shirt. So maybe at the next show,
100%.
I'll grab one from you as well. But very quickly, for those who haven't heard of burnouts, like, who are you, Chris? What's your background and how do burnouts get started and kind of what's the mission here?
Absolutely. So Burnouts is focused on culture overall. We're primarily focused within the channel because that's where I've spent the last few years and where the antithesis of this idea sort of came to be. If I can be honest with you, it was going to be a coffee shop that details your car in the drive-through. So that's the long-term business of where the name came from and what I wanted to do originally. But I was at a trade show and have experienced and talked with people that are dealing with company culture issues. And then it just clicked in my mind. It's like, wait a minute, burnout. Oh, okay, excellent. Maybe this is what the pathway was meant to be, helping companies with company culture. This is a huge issue. And there's a little bit of confusion about what culture is and what burnouts is. And we're here to hopefully just share our take on what they are and offer some insights and strategies that you can immediately take to have an impact with your culture and build stronger teams.
Absolutely. So let's dive right in. Okay, so burnout is definitely a phrase, a term that I think has had more and more popularity over the past few years. Some people might point towards just the craziness of the world today, maybe post COVID. There's a lot of different reasons that people give, but maybe you can talk to us a little bit about what your definition of burnout is, Chris. I mean, is it where people just are feeling sad and a bit lazy and I don't like my job today? What is your definition of burnout?
Absolutely. So I think burnout is when the expectations that you have for yourself, what you're working on, if you're not reaching that reality within the it's such a hard way to put this, like you said, right? So when you're trying to go after something and you're not achieving it, and you're trying and you're trying and you're putting all the effort into it, and all the roadblocks keep coming up, that can lead to burnout. But there's a lot of factors there. So burnout in our current situation, I think, is also generational. So we could have, let's just pick a generation and say a Gen Z employee that's working at a company primarily filled with an older generation that isn't quite understanding their language or what they're looking for, why they want a work-life balance versus pouring their heart and soul into the company because that's what the founders are expecting, right? That could lead to burnout where the expectation is not the reality.
Right.
So, it's mainly when that's it right there. When the reality does not meet your expectations, that's when you
Gotcha.
lead to burnout.
Seems like it's almost like you're saying like it's chronic misalignment in some ways. I get what you're saying, like where you keep trying and trying and trying and failing and
Once it
failing
reaches
and
a
failing.
repetitive moment, right? There's a difference between striving for something and not achieving it. Like I'm not burnt out with burnouts, but we're not where we want to be, right? We want to
Of
be
course.
we have our goals, but if we were to go on and on and on, we would probably get burnout if we never saw some of the expectations that we had come to reality.
Do you think people get burnt out as well from doing the same thing over and over again and feeling a lack of appreciation or a lack of pathway for progression in front of them?
Absolutely. And it's not an appreciation like, you did a great job, thank you for booking that client, right? That when it's when it's just kind of a fake representation of authenticity is a problem.
Mm.
Versus, even if your boss were to come to you and say, hey, I know that you struggled this month, which would be a terrible thing to say, right? Because obviously this person knows that they struggled that month, so you don't need to articulate that. But they were to come to you and already know that you struggled that month, not bother you with it, continue to hype you up, focus on the future, and ask that question, what can I do to help you out today? Make them give you an answer, provide that. This is a much better pathway, right? And then we can look back and say, okay, I've tried everything to make sure that this works. This employee now feels like they've been heard, and we're providing some feedback. I think that's certainly along the pathway of where it goes.
Got it. So whenever we kind of begin to dig into burnout a little bit more, it's clear that company culture plays a big role, and we actually had a whole other conversation about this on Augmenttors earlier this year about company culture and accountability charts. So we can definitely link that in the bottom of this description if people want to dive into the culture conversation. But Chris, for you, like, what role does company culture play when it comes to burnout?
I'll tell you, company culture is the one I get more excited to talk about. I know I named it Burnouts because, to me, I think Burnouts has a lot of different definitions, many of which I agree with. I know a lot of the smartest people that would be called burnouts by some people in the world. So I wanted to just take a new spin on that word particularly. I've certainly experienced burnout. I'll tell you, I've had burnout this year because I had loss in my family. I've dealt with some loss within my family for the first time, and that has like led to a different level of burnout, right? So there's kind of work burnout, then there's life burnout. We're still coming out of post COVID where that, right, is its own sort of burnout, but company culture is what is exciting to me because this helps turn the tide on burnout. You can see burnout, you can see someone experiencing hardships in their life, and if we have a great company culture, we might pull them out of the depths of what they're going through. And my definition on company culture is a balance of team and brand. So some companies think our company culture, we decide, we tell you, we have these values, we have these rules, we only hire people that do what we want. It does not work. Like, it does not work. They'll get far enough along, but you'll see a lot of turnover. You'll see a lack of innovation. But if we look at team and brand, so great product, but our team is not happy, culture is not aligned. If we have a great product and our team is on the same page, our customers and our employees, if that's aligned, I don't see how you could point to a fault in company culture. But we could
Yeah.
pick to each one, right? We could tip the scales depending on what you were to do on either side.
Yeah, it seems like collaboration seems to be a real critical ingredient for all those things to come together, right, and strike that balance. I mean, talking about culture and bringing in the company as a whole, there's a mix of obviously individuals and teams within that. In our conversation prior to this, Chris, you pointed out something to me that I hadn't really thought about before, which is the idea of individual burnout versus team burnout. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that and how we recognize the signs of, say, individual burnout versus team burnout?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say when it comes to team burnout, something that I've noticed is you can look at an organization, let's say the service side of an MSP, where tickets are answered really quickly, everything's solved, right? It's going great. That's how the business is going well, but sales and marketing are not. And maybe that team is struggling. Maybe that team's not receiving what they are asking for to help propel the business, right? So you can have one side that everyone on this side of the business says, oh, the culture is great, we love it here, no, there is no problems here. And you have the other side that is experiencing the complete opposite of this picture. And now this is where this imbalance comes in. Whereas again, let's say personal burnout, I love to work at a business where I don't have to have my hands in every piece of it, but I want to know every piece of it. I want to know that I can call someone on the support team because they had this great idea because I met them at a show and they made a great analogy for introverts, for extroverts, and I know that they can maybe help me on this piece that I'm working with an employee, but some companies want to really segregate their teams and they don't want to allow, I don't know if it's a control or a power issue, but absolutely. And when the teams have a great culture, again, when you see an individual through burnout, this doesn't happen as much. Now, this depends on who you're hiring, but there are teams that perform incredible work that are working very, very hard. Ordinary people would get burnout, but some people like to be pushed. Some people like to work really, really hard and they want to be told what to do, right? Some people are like that versus some people want to have, voice when they see a concern. And I think it comes down to just having the right team and being supportive of everybody and making sure that all their voices are heard. And when we're doing that, it's working pretty well, I think.
So I think what you're saying is definitely being aware that, there's horses for courses. There's different ways to motivate people in different ways that people like to work, and we need to be responsive and receptive to that. But fundamentally, Chris, is burnout something that can be prevented? It sounds like it is. So what things can we do to make sure that the burnout is prevented?
I think burnout can be prevented much like the common cold could be prevented. Would we want to take every step necessary to avoid it at all costs or to ensure all the time? No, because then we'd have the opposite effect. Maybe we'll then be exposed to a different disease because we never expose ourselves to anything. Or if we all the time are just great, well, then where's the bad? Where's the failure? Where's the growth? So I don't know if it's prevention that is as much a problem as recognition. And I think if we just make some sort of fundamental changes from the beginning of when you hire an employee all the way through their time and how you treat them when they're there, even when they leave, how you treat them, right? All has an impact on culture and burnout. And, it's a mess, but I think the conversation, even having the conversation helps for sure. Podcasts like this, where this conversation is becoming a much larger piece of the puzzle and business owners are realizing it's important to focus on.
Chris, can you tell us a story from your past where you've had direct experience? And we don't have to name any specific names, obviously, but I would love to hear, a tale of your own experience around the burnout and culture topic, where either you or a team you were part of or an individual, you could see people beginning to crash and burn in a big way, and kind of what that looked like or felt like.
Absolutely. I'll name the company because I wear them all the time, but I spent a few years working for Oakley on the retail side, which is where a lot of my passion comes from, is B2C, bringing that to the B2B world. And when I worked at Oakley in Colorado, we had a really high performing store, but there were culture issues. We had a manager that didn't quite align with both. I was an assistant manager and I had a fellow assistant manager. And both of the assistants, we were like aligned. Like we knew what it took to make the month and to hit the goals. And we're dealing with the staff on a daily basis. But we have a manager that just kind of, it has to be their vision all the time. And then eventually that didn't work. They got let go. Now the assistants are allowed to run the show, right? We're acting assistant managers. The minute that the control went back down to the team and it was feedback from salespeople, the motivation turned around, the numbers turned around, and we weren't afraid to challenge authority. I mean, anyone that works in retail has probably heard the term planogram or knows that you have to set the store a certain way according to how marketing, or the company is telling you to set it up. we're in Denver, Colorado in the mid 2010s. Female athletic wear is blowing up. Eyewear is blowing up, and they have it in the back of the store. But we're like, no, it's got to go to the front of the store. We put it to the front of the store. We didn't ask. I love the question, would you rather ask for permission or forgiveness? I ask for forgiveness. You have to take a chance, because at the end of the day, if you're right, you can argue your way right through. Look, well, we made the right decision, even if it wasn't going to be allowed. And we saw the culture turn around, and I can think back to those moments. I can think back to every team member and Sarah on the sales floor and Adam running to Starbucks and, buying people coffee on your gift card just because you're working with them. And I'll tell you what, it turns into sales. You're hitting goals. And that, I think, is when businesses run their best, is from the bottom up. And that's the problem, is when it's the top, everyone telling you, everyone fall in line, that culture falls apart. So that's what I would say is Oakley, and it might be why I still wear them today, is I'm so passionate about that brand, and it kind of impacted who I am today.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point you made, Chris, around it feels like just treating everyone like human beings, and that's kind of a very big and general statement. But if you think about what that isn't, or what that doesn't look like, yeah, it's more of an authoritarian, this is my way, this is how we're going to do things, and I don't care if you have a good idea how to improve something, or based on your day-to-day experience in this box that you're responsible for ticking, if you have ideas to tick it faster, tick it harder, tick it better, whatever it is, I don't really care, because like you said about the manager that you worked for, it's my vision, I'm in control, and we're doing what I say. I think that leads to a lot of dissatisfaction, and a real lack of motivation for people, particularly whenever they may have originally joined a team because they wanted to make an impact and drive success and be part of building something. So
I want to touch on one point, because you really kicked it into the next gear. That is exactly the point. When you hire someone, you go through interviews, you vet them, you do everything, right? And then you hire them. You're supposed to give them the trust. You're not supposed to sit there and babysit them. And so that is also where burnout comes in, is it's a lack of trust. And so then you come into it and you're like, well, I can't make any decisions, but if we don't make goal, who do they come? They come to me and they tell me I'm in trouble. Why didn't we do this? And then I tell you why. And then you're like, oh, well, you can't use that as an excuse. So make the decision. Put the women's wear in the front because it's selling. And then they are not going to argue with you because you're going to make your money, but they are going to argue with you if you don't. And that's the struggle, is that so many owners, they're in it more for power than they're in it for profits, which is kind of sad. And it hurts the staff, and they're afraid to take action. I've been retaliated against. I know people that have been retaliated against simply for speaking their voice. That's all. Telling the truth and speaking their voice. So many founders and leaders, they don't want to hear your voice.
Yeah, it's funny how that happens sometimes. I mean, if we put the channel lens on things, and think about the life of a technician, I think, it's something I hear from technicians directly. It's something I hear from MSP owners. Burnout seems to be an increasing problem there, and it's not difficult to understand why. You were chatting, you and I, before this, every month there's a new cyber threat, and that's stressful, and you got to work out what that is and how to prevent it. Oh, well, guess what? Now there's this new tool and platform that deals with this exact issue, and if you buy it, that'll help solve your problems. So buy it, onboard it, get it all configured, make sure that's working, and that you become the expert as the technician, but also stay on top of your tickets and deal with other things. Oh, next month though, then now there's this new big threat that we didn't know about before. Oh, but don't worry, someone else has already created the response to that, so you have to get that now, and look at that. So it seems like there's constant noise, constant stress, constant activity, and just constant pressure on MSP technicians. And so it's very easy to understand why a lot of them are burnt out. Can you help us understand maybe some methods or mechanisms for helping specifically MSP technicians deal with that, both as kind of a technician, whether it's asking for help or not being afraid to take certain actions, and also as the business owner, what they can do proactively to make sure that their teams are avoiding burnout?
Absolutely. Great point about technicians. I think they're the unsung heroes of the channel. They are the most overworked. They're whittling away, keeping everything running while, trade shows are attended or sales is worked on, or, the profit of the business. But these guys are having a very hard time. And I can't take credit for this. The idea was from another MSP, but I just helped him spin it to how this could be a positive, and even you could market this to your customers. So they were running a 24/7 service model. So this guy is on call all the time. He's completely he literally can never get away. And this MSP is like, we're going to go to more of a 9 to 5. We're going to set this schedule. I've talked with my guys. I found out the times we need to be there. Our tickets our satisfaction is through the roof. So we know people are happy, right? So as long as we keep that, we got to make every effort to help our people. And so he's moved this structure. This is recent, so it's going to take time, but I'm sure that when you prioritize your people first, then you have a reason to tell your customers. If your customers are like, oh, I'm used to this model, why do you do this? Well, we do this to prioritize the mental health of our employees. We do this to make sure we have a great company culture, so that when you are on the phone, when we are open, these tickets are handled in a record amount of time with a satisfaction that you will not believe. And by the way, we found out that 95% of people have never reached out to us at this time, right? So you do the data, you find out when those times are, but I promise you, it's not 24/7. And by just that mental unload of, okay, I can step away. Even I, as a technician, can have work-life balance, which is becoming like a dirty word, but I'm a millennial and Gen Zs are coming. So get ready for work-life balance. It's only going to get worse.
But going to get worse or better, depending how you look at it, right?
Worse or better. Yeah, I don't know. But that's what it's about, is listen to your people. Or hey, if you've got a guy that's like, look, I don't mind it. Let me be 24/7, but pay me this. Pay him. I think it's just human to human, right? Let's work on pay. Let's work on time when we're there. But if we agree to something, I'm going to hold up my end and you're going to hold up your end.
Yeah, and if someone maybe looking at from a business proposition, you might not be able to afford giving someone a raise, but maybe that person doesn't actually want more monetary value. Maybe they'd be much more interested in extra days off or time off, or like you say,
or responsibility. They might want more work. Yeah. They might want to go to a trade show. I mean, you might just need to ask them instead of telling them. They just don't. Or I don't know. Let me ask you, George, what's the culture like within? I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you feel comfortable speaking up? Do you encourage all your people, and do you ask them,
Yeah, I think
because it is uncomfortable. I think for some people it's hard
at Augmentt and have a really collaborative team, which is great, and certainly our leaders kind of have that open door policy and really want to listen and hear the feedback from everyone, which is great. So yeah.
And I mean, you're hosting this podcast, right? So again, exactly. I know that you're on the right track. But that's really what it's about, is just listening to people instead of telling them. Right.
Well, so, kind of to finish off the talk track here, what I've seen, some charts, some diagrams, some different social media posts, and I've heard even people talking about burnout and people who've said, I had burnout. And in some cases, they talk about how it took them years to recover, they just could not kind of get out of that rut, or I just really had that every type of emotional and energetic and intellectual baseline to just flattened. And it took them a long time to be able to kind of ramp up again to where they felt productive, or in some cases even felt like they could work. So do you have any strategies or recommendations for how people can recover from burnout, and what does that roadmap look like?
For sure. I think one thing is to educate yourself. I know it sounds silly, but YouTube, we talked earlier about Diary of a CEO. I love YouTube. I've gone to YouTube to ask random questions, burnout, culture, whatever it is. You go right to YouTube and get a lot of opinions, get some educated opinions, because you can sort by views. You can really kind of dial it in. So the first thing I would do is, it's on you, first of all, because it's yourself. So at the end of the day, if you don't have a company behind you, if you're in the place where maybe family or your friends aren't behind you, it's going to come down to yourself. So there are resources out there. That's just kind of step one. But burnout, you're right. It can take a lot, but I also think it can be small little things that can turn it around as well. Surprise and delight. Again, just coming back to your people, I don't understand why businesses seem to almost have like a wall up between the humanity of their employees. I don't know if it's just some companies I've worked for, because I have worked for others that are the opposite. And I've prided myself on being a leader that is the opposite, but I want to know my people as much as they're willing to let me know, right? I'm not saying you have to be friends with everyone that you work with. That is not the case. And you're going to have disagreements, and you're going to have people that, that you just don't get along. But we can all make an effort. We can all be respectful and know that we're all going through a lot of challenges at the end of the day. So I don't know. I think burnout gets a blanket term. Burnout, probably we need to really narrow this in and say this is burnout, which is a limit beyond, like almost a recovery or a control. That's when it's just too far. And when it is pushed too far, I think the only thing that can truly heal it is time. Like that word, time heals all wounds. It heals a lot of wounds, and it's a subconscious level. And so just stay committed to what you're working on and look for new avenues to grow. But again, at the end of the day, some things are out of our control. We want to help, but I think such a hard question to answer, but I hope that gave you a little bit of just my thought process. Again, just my thought process here.
It is, and to your point, with more and more Gen Z coming, I'm sure this is going to be a topic that sees a lot more attention in the years to come.
And that's going to help us. I'm going to just say, like, everybody, these conversations are awesome to have. They're great, and the next generation, that they are so open with their mental health or prioritizing what they need. There's nothing wrong with that. It's funny that business owners and entrepreneurs, they can take every step in the world. They cut throats to make money. But if a younger employee comes up and says, hey, I need a little more vacation. Hey, why can't we work this work schedule? All of a sudden, that's a problem. Like, there's some issues here. We'll have to have another podcast on generational divide and its effects on burnout and culture.
It's a conversation for sure. I know there's a lot of older business owners out there that are quite frankly a little bit bewildered and struggling with some of the younger generations coming in, and how they go about their business and what motivates them, and it's just so different to whenever they were in their early 20s, doing the same type of tasks and jobs. So Chris, thank you so much for your time today. We're going to wrap things up there. Just a quick shout out to Augmentt for sponsoring this podcast on the subject of burnout. If you are a technician that feels like you're struggling a lot, please do check Augmentt out. It is all about simplifying M365 security. So instead of taking hours or days to go in and harden that Microsoft environment that does need to be regularly inspected and updated because things deprecate, end users turn things off, Augmentt makes that simple and lets you get it done with a few clicks. So if you are interested, we do have a 14-day free trial where you can sign up and check things out. Chris, little word for you just on burnouts in general. I mean, if people want to learn more, where can they go, and what are some of the things that you're doing currently with some of your own clients and working on, and some of the services that you offer?
So primarily right now, we focus on LinkedIn. So I'm taking a unique approach with our brand. We do not have a website. Primarily we're focused on LinkedIn. You can directly message us, follow Burnouts or myself, Christopher Orris at Burnouts on LinkedIn. We are active 24/7. That's our non-burnout model. You can reach us anytime. Even if you have a question about an employee where you're struggling to communicate, don't make the irrational decision. Don't just fire someone. Don't just let the situation continue to go on. We help businesses improve their company culture by balancing their team and their brand. So remember, it's also, we want to lead from the bottom up with your team, but your brand comes into this as well. So we want to make sure that our customers are being taken care of. We're not using any deceptive tactics when we work with our great MSPs out there. I know our MSPs have some horror stories in the way that they're marketed to. So company culture, team, and brand, hit us up.
Fantastic. Chris, thanks again so much for your time, and thanks to everyone who joined us live here today. And if you're watching on YouTube at a later date, please check the description for key links below. Thanks again. Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, George. Thank you, guys.